What up, gamers? I'm Jason.
I'm Julie.
And today on Dice and Dragons, we are doing the first episode of our new segment that is tentatively, perhaps permanently being called What's on the Table. And what do we have on the table today, Julie?
We have a deck builder.
Yes, we've got the Power Rangers deck building game. Currently, we just got through the RPM expansion, which you'll be seeing reviewed on the channel shortly. We're going to dive in with Flying Higher because we got to do a nice mashup and get both of them played at the same time. So maybe we'll even see a back-to-back review. Haven't quite figured that out yet. So today, we are going to be talking deck building games. Now, the whole purpose of this segment is to give you a little bit of history about us, how we started playing games. We're going to talk about the games, talk about the mechanics, what we like, what we don't like, what we think makes a great deck builder, and some of the elements that deck builders have started incorporating, such as boards with Clank, also Thunderstorm Quest has a board and miniatures, and how that's really sort of changed the genre, kept it fresh, and maybe one of the reasons why it's Julie's favorite? Question mark?
Well, and I think it is, and I if somebody does ask me, most of the time I do say there are other games that I've enjoyed as well, but generally speaking, I like deck builders. Now, there are some that you bring up that we've talked about that I said, I don't remember that game. But generally speaking, I like deck builders. Now, why? Because the first deck builder that we played, according to Jason,
altogether, we got to pick it up at a convention with a very special box. It was awesome. Got to test out the Power Rangers miniatures game at the same time.
Okay, but you say that our first deck builder that we played was
Scott Pilgrim versus the World.
If I don't understand how I played another deck builder after playing that game, because it was not good.
The game was functional, but one of the things that we have found in deck building games, and there's only one game so far that's been the exception to this rule, is the amount of resources that you need to manage can greatly affect your gameplay experience. And Scott Pilgrim had 3 separate resources, plus the back of the cards were fighting cards. So you'd be playing the cards for certain things, then have to keep some of the cards, and then fight the evil X's. Great idea. Did not come together very well in execution. Now we've got the My Little Pony game, Adventures in Equestria, with 3 resources, and for whatever reason, it actually works. We both sat down when we started playing the game, we're like, this is 3 resources. This might be terrible. And it definitely was not. We had a lot of fun playing the game.
Yeah. So the second game deck builder that Jason introduced me to was Clank.
Yeah, the original Clank.
And Clank in Space.
I think part of the reason why you got into deck builders was because we had the board. So it didn't seem like you were playing a deck builder like Scott Pilgrim. It wasn't just cards. We're getting some new elements and new mechanics that were...
Well, I enjoyed the element of picking up, like getting a little competitive, but not too competitive in the sense that you're trying to pick up the best card. However,
treasure.
Yeah, it kind of soured on me after my own mother fed me to the dragon, and I seem to have lost the last couple of games, and I'm like, now, when somebody says they want to play Clank, I'm like, yeah, no, I don't think I want to play.
Yes. Her mother was the first one to leave. Julie was deep in the dungeon. She did not make it out alive.
No, she sacrificed me on purpose. She knew what she was doing.
She pretended afterwards that she did not, but she totally knew. I warned her.
She still to this day says she didn't realize it. In any case, I mean, the one standout for me that I truly love is Legendary.
I'd say there's 2. Because it doesn't seem like a deck building game, but
let's talk about Legendary first before we talk about the other one. I know what you're talking about.
Exactly. I just want to be clear.
There's 3, because there's one I really like that you don't like, because there's a negative, there's something that's missing from it. So let's talk about Legendary. Legendary and Legendary Encounters. We have both.
We've got quite a few of the games. We enjoy them, and Legendary, I would say, was probably our first real classic traditional deck building experience,
where you're working together, right?
Yep. Well, no, it's the first cooperative one, but it was our first traditional one where it's really, you've got just the board, your setup of cards. Well, you don't really have a board, but you have a board to manage. Yeah, you've got the playmat because we've got the MCU version to manage the cards. And then you're building your cards based on what's available, and then you're working together to fight the villains, which is that cooperative element. But the core mechanics are different cards, different things combo together. You want to go with different resource types to get your biggest combo and then be the mightiest hero. So there is still that little bit of competitive aspect
which
of it.
we've never really looked at, honestly.
No, we don't really focus on that aspect of the game because if you lose, everyone loses, so it's really up to you. I like the fact that it's optional.
Yeah, X-File definitely, holds a special place in my heart just because of the IP. And Marvel just was, I don't know how many times we've played it. We haven't gotten it back to the table in a while. And
no new expansions for the MCU version, which is why it's kind of been pushed aside.
Well, because we've been reviewing things for not playing for fun.
And that's part of the reason why we're doing this segment, is to give us a little bit more time to dive into different games. And you'll probably see us more often than not at this table having some type of big box cooperative game in front of us. The reason why we got the vaulted table is to put the cooperative game in there. So you may see us having gotten a few plays of that in, then we'll have something else that's on the table to review. This is really to give us the time to go back and revisit games like Legendary and play the big box games that got a lot of you here in the first place.
So there is a mechanic that is sometimes missing or not enough of in deck builders that drive Jason absolutely batty. And I'm wondering if he's going to tell me the answer I want him to tell me. So one of my favorite that Jason really doesn't like as much is Harry Potter.
Yes. Harry Potter Hogwarts Battle, which has the potential to be a great deck building game. And it's one that I think some of the expansions, especially the latest one, which I'm drawing a blank on, but I think it's the Charms and Potions expansion, I think did a lot to improve the game. But its biggest failing is the fact that you get so many cards with the game that eventually you need very specific ones to advance, and there's a good chance that they can be stuck somewhere in the bottom of the deck. And we had probably one of our worst gaming experiences with Harry Potter Hogwarts Battle, where we literally had managed to stay alive this year 7. We've probably acquired about half of the deck of cards, and we still haven't had a single of the cards that we needed. Now, this is just pure fluke and random chance, but we realized that all the cards we need were in the bottom half of the deck. So the chances to cycle through, we'd probably be playing the game for another couple hours, really just trying to survive and somehow call our deck, because in the core box, there are no call mechanics, which I think was a big mistake. Something that was addressed definitely later on.
So that's your second pet peeve, is when you don't have the option to call cards to get rid of them. I have a couple here that I got to do in this game. It definitely has it, and that's one of the reasons why you really enjoyed this particular game, is because you definitely have that option.
Well, I have my own issues with this game as well. I mean, that's the other thing that I don't always like about deck builders is pacing. And that ties in directly with Hogwarts Battle, because depending on a couple of things with that game, you can play a 60-minute game, you can play a 3.5-hour game, depending on the way it goes. And that is very tricky to manage. We've house ruled a few things with the setup of Hogwarts Battle. We basically kind of ensure that the stuff that we need is going to show up within the first couple of hours of play and not get us to a ridiculously long gameplay.
So another deck builder that we've played a lot of, there's a bunch of reviews from us, is Aeon's End.
And I think that was kind of the game that I think, if there was any question that you loved deck builders, what you thought about legacy games, what you thought about like campaign games. We'd been playing some campaign games, but that was really the one that says like any type of game with a campaign is going to be our jam, most likely, provided we like the core mechanics of it. I think Aeon's End was the one that sealed it. It was the first time that we played a cooperative campaign game that was not miniature based.
First time I wrote on a game, like where you said, "Okay, let's pull out the pen," and I'm like, "I'm what?"
Yes.
That took some getting used to, but after a while, you get used to it, and it's all good.
Also, you get the nice reset back. So when I showed you, don't worry, we can replace all the cards, you felt less bad about scribbling on them.
Yeah. So Aeon's End, definitely love from a pacing, from a upgrading, from all the different cards, the story. It's just a great game.
And I can't wait for the latest expansion to come out, as well as Astro Knights, the futuristic version, which is supposed to address some of the concerns. The only issue we've run into with Aeon's End is a couple of unbalanced bosses, and also just a problem with deck builders, but it's also a problem with any type of cooperative game, is the scaling's completely off. The game is much easier at 2 players than it is at 4 players. We like to challenge ourselves, and we like to play all the mages for review purposes, so we each always play 2 mages. But when you're getting a chance to improve your deck essentially 2 times in the same round, it can lead to a lot more devastating combos and a lot more power being built up by the mages compared to having each mage essentially getting 1 turn per round. It just makes the nemesis that much more deadly, and it's quite clear that the game is balanced around that 4-player count.
So there's another game that you were talking about when we were talking about it that I don't remember.
Yeah, Thunderstone Quest, and there's also, I'd say, probably the last game we'd want to talk about is also Dune Imperium. And the reason why we're talking about those 2 games is they're really... Actually, there's a third one. How could I forget this one? Polly, your third favorite deck builder, and your most enjoyed competitive one, Lost Ruins of Arnak.
Right.
Yes. So those games, because of the board and the other elements, sometimes we don't think of them necessarily as a deck builder. They fall into that board game category. But the deck building is such a core aspect of those games that it's a lot of fun. Now, Thunderstone Quest is very different because it's got a campaign element, a one-off element. It's got a really neat element that you have to basically move your miniature into the dungeon. And what you really liked and what I really liked was that the competitive game mode is really not in your face at all. Like, you're not going to be attacking each other. You're just competing for resources, trying to execute your plan. And while playing the campaign mode, that worked very well for us. We got through quite a few games. Our campaign has been on pause for a very long time because one thing became quite apparent. Julie likes playing mages. I like playing rogues. The rogues was competitive to the mage for a while, but eventually the simple fact that my characters, the cards that I was able to carry over, let me venture further into the dungeon before she got the chance to, just meant that I was gaining more and more powerful stuff. And it kind of led to a steamroll runaway effect. Now, I don't think that would necessarily happen with a campaign.
I guess I played a toddler and I said, well, I'm leaving my thins. I don't want to play with you anymore.
That's exactly what happened. You're like, I'm tired of losing my 40 points these last 3 games. Even though you beat my butt by 40 points a couple games and I didn't pack my stuff up and go home.
Yeah, you do other times. Yeah, so I mean, that's a good example of, why some games I just don't enjoy as much. And competitive games, if you can run away with it and it's obvious and there's a definite balancing issue, it's just not for me.
And but we have Lost Ruins of Arnak, which can very rarely have a runaway scenario. And if it does, typically the reason why it's a runaway scenario is you've played the game very well. And you have to do very specific things to win the game like that. The only one we've had was when I managed to get the airplane and basically calm my deck so that I was drawing my entire hand every single time.
That was not a fun game.
No, that's because I had a very good deck going and I basically just pulled the whole thing every time, played my deck, and just got a ton of points and was able to just go very fast, very far.
So are we forgetting any that really come to mind?
Well, Dune Imperium, I think, is one that we really need to talk about. I'd say that Lost Ruins of Arnak, you've got the board, you've got some nice components, some different things that you're going to be moving on the board, but it doesn't have a lot more elements in the board itself. We really like it. There's also the solo campaign mode. There's more expansions coming for it. The latest expansion gave you the ability to play asymmetrically instead of just everyone having the same thing. And I really like that as well about some deck builders when you can get asymmetric powers. The last time we played Clank, we'd actually use the asymmetric characters, and that was pretty cool. Instead of just having the same thing. But we like variety. And I think that one of the reasons we've really enjoyed deck building games is that even when playing the same game, depending on how the shuffle goes, you're never going to get the same experience. And we love Dune Imperium, and for just the simple fact of the games that we've been reviewing, a lot of support we've got to the channel. It's been a while since it's gone to the table. I want to get it back to the table. I think Dune really took deck building in a whole new, well, not a whole new direction, but I think it showed off a different way that it could be a key part of the game because you're building the decks. Your board's very important, but then you've got the intrigue and the combat cards and your influence. Like, there's just a lot of different components around that game that make it so that the deck building isn't necessarily the number one aspect. Like, I got my butt whooped when I tried to play the game as a deck builder. Julie played the game as it was. I was like, I'm just going to build the best deck. And I lost quite handily.
It's funny, though, because we played Dune and Arnak roughly at the same time.
Yeah.
It's been a while that we've played either of those games, but I barely remember Dune, and I definitely remember Arnak. So it shows you the difference. For me, as you just said, I didn't really play that. I didn't consider it a deck builder. I didn't play it as a deck builder. It's not sticking in my mind. Arnak does, though. Plus, Arnak is really pretty.
And I also think it was the theme. I get the feeling that now that you've seen Dune Part 1, if we play Dune Imperium around Part 2, it's going to be a lot more...
I don't know. I mean, Arnak's basically, Indiana Jones. So.
It's Indiana Jones, the deck building game. And then I would one day love to play Fortune and Glory, because that's Indiana Jones, the miniatures game. But that's a completely side topic. And don't worry, we will definitely be talking miniatures game, cooperative miniatures game. Heck, we even have enough plays now of skirmish games to talk about those.
And dungeon crawlers.
Yeah, dungeon crawls. Well, that almost falls under miniatures game, but they're definitely separate now that I think about it. So,
yeah. I don't have really anything else to add. Like I said, I really like Legendary and Legendary Encounters. It's the cooperative version. It's all the different cards that come up. It's the different, as you said, the different game that's played every time you shuffle those
but Legendary does have a flaw as well, like we've mentioned, that sometimes the combos just don't come out. In Legendary, you can have the time where you get a big deck and you're just not getting what you need. The difference is that as a cooperative game, typically you have someone that's going to keep it advancing, but you can have some pretty flub games of Legendary as well. When you're looking at games like...
It doesn't happen as often, though.
No, it doesn't happen as often, but I've had a few of them. But if you're looking at games like Arnak and other games that definitely focus on the mechanics and having some of those core mechanics, something that isn't really present in at least the MCU version of Legendary, something we found in some of the other versions of the game. So I would say we've more had issues with Marvel, not the more refined versions. You can definitely have some of those negative experiences. I think what we should do now is give a nice summary of what we really like about deck builders and what are the things that you need to look out for and that could really lead a deck builder completely off the rails.
Well, I think that's what I just did. I just summarized what I liked, and what I don't like is when it's more competitive, like Clank. That's a little bit less.
Or kind of like Power Rangers and...
Power Rangers I enjoyed as well. I think because of this one specifically that we're playing, spoiler alert if you watch this before you watch the review, it's a little quicker.
Yeah, I would say this. One of the biggest issues I had with Power Rangers was the pacing, and I'd say the core box was pretty awful in terms of pacing. We talked a little bit about it, but I think we should talk a little bit more before we get to the last summary. I think a deck building game sits very well in between that 60 to 90 minute mark. I think once you start going past that, unless you're hitting that mark because of the amount of players, it starts to get a little long in the tooth. And we had some experience with this one that easily we're starting to push the 2-hour mark in a way that really wasn't fun. Kind of like, I hit you, I block. I hit you, I block. And it was just kind of this slug back and forth. Now, this game has addressed pacing, which is pretty cool, so we'll definitely be talking about that in the review. So, stuff to watch out for deck building games. Resources, the amount of resources that you have in the game, because that can be a big issue. Resource management, the level, the cognitive load, because with easier to manage resources, it's going to be a lot more accessible to get to the table. Heck, we even forgot to talk about Transformers and G.I. Joe, 2 great deck building games, by the way. So those are some of the other ones that we enjoy, but they're not quite up on the list. I have to say, though, G.I. Joe, we need to play it. And if we'd played it recently, we'd probably talk about it more because you liked that a lot more than I thought you would. It was really funny looking at her scowl at G.I. Joe, then playing the game being like, that was great. So that's another thing that's great about deck builders. The theme and the mechanics can come through very, very well to create gameplay experiences.
Well, like Harry Potter, House Cup.
Yep. Well, not House Cup, I mean Hogwarts Battle.
Hogwarts Battle.
Yeah, that are incredibly thematic to the game, but just really shine through as a great game that you don't need to love the theme, don't really love the game. But Julie got the great summary down, so I'm just going through the negatives. Pacing, Once again, we're talking about resource management, lack of co-mechanics, size of the deck itself, and I would say rules related to expansions is something you really want to keep in mind, because taking a look at Hogwarts Battle, a game that we love, when you start trying to mix in both expansions, especially if the cards are sleeved, you might have a stack of cards this high, and I was going to say I am exaggerating, but unfortunately not by much. It was literally like that high when we put them all together. But we sleeve the cards, so keep that in mind as well. That's the other thing to keep in mind about deck builders on the negative side is keeping them in good condition. Now, games are meant to be played. We like to sleeve our deck builders, especially ones that we like more often than not, because it is going to keep them longer. It can be a very minimal cost to sleeve the game, depending on the amount of cards.
Weren't we happy that we had our legendary game sleeve when we went to game night and somebody pulled out the Doritos and started playing with Doritos?
Yeah, Doritos and Cheetos are definitely not allowed anywhere near this game table.
Do you have anything to add?
No, I think that's everything. We summarized what we liked, what we didn't like. Hope you got a little bit, a chance to get to know us a little bit more. Please let us know what you thought about this segment of what's on our table. If you hate the name of the segment, give us another name. We'll rename it in the future if we like it. Not promising anything, but this is something new that we're trying, and hopefully you enjoy this type of content. Now we'd like to remind you to
keep playing games.
Like, comment, subscribe.
Oh, I was gonna say we want to pick up our drink. See, it's the first time we do this.
Yes. So like, comment, subscribe, hit the notification bell so that YouTube will let you know our next video is released. Also, down below is the video description where you find links to all of our social media feeds. Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. If you'd like to see some pictures of what Julie and I have been playing on the table, check out those feeds. We've pulled back on that a little bit because we're not playing as many games, but there's still lots of great stuff on those feeds. Do a couple posts weekly.
And in front of Jason will be popping up our newest video. And in front of me, I'm going to say we're going to do one of the legendaries.
So yeah, we'll take you back to one of our reviews of Legendary Marvel. I'll decide which one when we get to that phase. Now we're now going to grab our drink, grab our best friend. And remind you to keep playing games.